Hey guys, welcome to the slideshow. So we're not in the shop today. Today we're just doing a little bit of a PowerPoint. This video is actually inspired by a viewer who emailed me and sent me a gun drill on eBay. And it's actually really funny because I've had a friend do the same thing. A gun drill is not tipped specifically for firearms work, but they are used for firearms work. And we'll get into an explanation of them later. But I just thought it just gave me an interesting idea for covering, deep hole drilling, because that's really what they're for. So, that's just our introduction for today. And I think we're just going to jump right into it. So, long story short, what do you do when a normal drill won't work? Well, you can jump to what's called a double margin drill, which has two margins on the leading and trailing edge of the twist, which helps guide it in the hole for better straightness and more closer to its nominal size than a typical twist drill bit. Some of them are piloted, some of them are set up for through coolant. We'll have a brief explanation of what through coolant is later in the video, but these are kind of an in between more specialty drilling and what we typically think of as a drill bit. And we're not going to cover spade or insert drills today. We're just covering gun drills. They're just one type of deep hole drilling technology. And it's important to remember, like, machining's a huge place. There's No matter how much you know, there's always something new. So when we're picking a drill bit, we look at the length to diameter ratio, which I'm expressing as L over D. So typical drill bits really stop performing around LD5, i.e., they're drilling 5 times their diameter. You can push them up to 10 times their diameter. I have done 20 in extreme circumstances, but it's not ideal. So a double margin drill bit is really just to make it practical to drill to LD10. Boring also has similar limits. There are some extreme specialty boring bars that are good out to, I believe, LD20, but they're extremely expensive and extremely niche. So when we're looking at really, really deep holes like this, we wind up transitioning to gun drills because they're limited to LD100 in practical applications, where you can really drill on size to within a 10,000th of an inch and within really a couple thousandths of straightness over feet, not a couple of inches. So they're really in a world of their own when it comes to deep hole drilling, and to me, they're extremely impressive. Coming from a sort of repair, job shop, home gamer background, when we look at something like a gun drill, it boggles the mind. They're hard to process, and they're, for me, even harder to explain to someone who just doesn't grasp how impressive that straightness is. So, if you can't do a normal drill bit, got to break out the gun drill. They are hard to set up. They're fussy. They're complicated. They're single flute, typically brazed or ground carbide. I do believe insert gun drills exist, but I am not aware of any. And they're straight. It pretty much, the limit on these is how much setup and how long you're willing to wait. It's not about practical limits on them. If you've got the coolant pressure, you can keep going. I think that's one of the big issues. In the next slide, we're going to show what the cross section of drilling with them looks like. So you got to pilot these guys, as you see, and you've got to support them on the way in because they're so long and skinny. They're like a wet noodle, even though they're made out of steel or typically carbide now. And you see in the diagram, you're pumping in high pressure coolant, which can be a few hundred PSI, to evacuate chips because they have no helix. So there's no natural chip evacuation or auger effect. The only chip evacuation in them comes from the coolant pressure, which is one of the unique things about them. I think even a lot of spade and insert drills do have some helix designed into them so they can do their own chip evacuation. And again, guys, like, I'm not a specialist. I don't run gun drills. I haven't even seen one in person, but I've studied them. So take all this information with a grain of salt and do your own research. but what's really cool about them is just their ability to drill stupid deep holes. And in the next slide, we're actually going to show a gun drilling machine with a little bit of a pillow block, which we'll explain when we get there. It's the setup on these guys is one of the big downsides, and why, if you have other options, boring is still used, because boring setup can be done in a conventional engine lathe. Gun drilling does require specialist machines, and you see how there has to be a pillow block to support, and you might need multiple in the beginning as you're feeding in, and you need high pressure coolant. And gun drills are hard to set up. There's more than one way to do it. Now, you can use these actually on heat exchangers. So I think in some aerospace and nuclear applications where welding in tubes for what is effectively a boiler isn't practical, where you might try and make it out of one solid piece. You could 3D print it and then gun drill out the center of the heat exchangers, because you have such a precise tolerance on it. There are specialist hydraulic pumps that require this manufacture, not just rifle and pistol barrels. So it's kind of, think about any time where you've got a half-inch hole that's 3 feet long, or anything with sort of a similar length to diameter ratio, and that's what you use this for. But you have to set the machines up right. They have to be extremely rigid. Uh, you can't. It's like using carbide in a hand drill. You can do it, but it's asking for trouble. And when you get to really deep holes, all of your alignment matters. Leveling the machine matters. There's a lot more that goes into it. This last slide here is just a picture of a tip of a style of gun drill, and showing the single flute and how they're ground in such a way to flood coolant and push that out through the flute. And this is just the driver end of it. Now, I think most gun drills aren't ridiculously long and drilling to 100 times diameter, but that is a potential application for them. They're called gun drills because this technology was first developed for drilling barrels, but it's not the only use for them, guys. So thanks for watching. I really hope you guys found this informative. It is fun taking a break from my usual content and just doing a slideshow. I think, it appeals to the bureaucrat in me. But, we don't want to feed that too much. So again, thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed.